product owner Demystified, and I think there have been quite a few talks about disruption in this at this conference. And there's this great book of Thomas Friedman, "Thank You for Being Late," which is a little bit of a weird title, but it's a great book. And there's this one chapter when he talks about warfare in the medieval ages, and if you look at the longbow, this was the weapon of choice for many, many centuries, for about from the 12th century to the 15th century. So there wasn't really any advancement, any change there. Now, if you look at the last 100 years, and I just picked basically tanks and aircraft, how they changed, it's dramatically. Now we even have drones, and some of them are kind of just fly on their own. So technology advancement is really accelerating every year, and I think this is what we kind of consider as disruption. And most industries are anticipate that they will be somehow disrupted by it. And to be honest, I'm a little bit surprised by that, because why is it disruption if technology is making advancement? Why is it not considered to be enablement? I mean, we have healthcare also being 47% are healthcare. I would expect that the technology we have will actually help us to cure even more illnesses in a more efficient way.
Yes, Ralph, and this is the very good point for disruption due to technical issues, because we can't see your presentation.
Okay, that's weird. So probably I have to go back all the way. And could you tell me what I should be doing? Or hang on for a second.
Yeah.
I think
you need to try to share your Zoom screen,
yes,
and then I will have a confirmation.
And now let me do that here.
Yeah, I've got the
okay.
in the studio. Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I guess that was actually my mistake. So here we go.
Thank you very much. That was a great.
So I just had a warming up run. So let me just repeat it again. So maybe we can talk a little bit faster here. Okay, great. So product owner Demystified. So let me just dive into that once more. So disruption and longbow. I talked about this guy. I mean, it was the weapon of choice for couple of hundred years, from the 12th century into the 15th century. So warfare hadn't really changed for so many centuries essentially. And but now if you look at the last 100 years essentially, and I'm just picking out tanks and aircraft here and how they changed dramatically over the last 100 years. And now we even have drones, and some of them actually fly more or less by artificial intelligence. And with that, so many industries are anticipating moderate or massive digital disruption in the next 12 months. So media is the most, but if you look down here at healthcare, why are they think they're being disrupted? I think if technology makes advancements, I think that should be good for us, that we can make better diagnoses, cure more illnesses, all of these things. So why don't we look at it as a enablement? It gives us more better tools, powerful tools at our fingertips. And the way I'm thinking it can be explained is if you look at this book, From Project to Product, from Mick Kirsten, and it's kind of fully on in this book when he talks about certain leaps forward we had. And each one of those rows is essentially kind of describes about 50 years. And so the first industrial revolution started in the end of the 17th century. And usually it takes about 20-25 years. The installation period, we discover some new technologies, we understand them, we start to work with them, and then there's this turning point, and that's basically when it enters the mainstream. And after that, there's the deployment period. And this is kind of repeating like pretty much blocks of 50 years. Then we had the age of steam and railways, age of steel and heavy engineering, age of oil and mass production. And since the 70s, age of software and digital. Now the internet is coming up, now computers are there, all of these things. And we are right now in the turning point. Probably we entered it around 2000. The question is, when is it over? And once the turning point is basically concluded, the dice are cast. And if you look back, all of those kind of leaps forwards we had is that once the turning point is over, there will be some companies doing really, really well because they have understood how to leverage the new technology, to how to be enabled by it, and many losers. And I think so many companies are afraid about losing out, and this is why they probably call it digital disruption in a negative way. And how can we look at this from a product owners or product management perspective? And I'd like to share a couple of principles with you, which I'm working and living by essentially. And let's dive here into the first principle. And for me, this is really paramount. I think this is really, if you want to do agile product development, that's really, and I just said it essentially, you should think in products, not in projects. And I still see this project mindset so everywhere. We initiate projects and all of these things, but in the end of the day, let me ask you this question. Could you deliver all your projects on scope, on time, on budget, and still fail as a company? And the simple answer is yes. Because if you build the wrong product on time, on scope, and budget, it's still the wrong product. Nobody will buy it. And at this point, I have to think about Nokia. I mean, Nokia was the brand for phones. They were everywhere. They knew how, I mean, they set the industry standard for many, many years. And then suddenly a different phone came out and people wanted to use their fingers and different operating system and things like that. And they still kept on building great working phones, but nobody wanted them anymore. So the market changed around them. So essentially, we as consumer, we consume products, not on projects. And we are surrounded by products. And in that regard, if you think about it, how many products you used already today? It's probably in the low hundreds. You got out of bed, there was a product. You were woken by your alarm clock or maybe an app on your phone. That's a product. You bought some coffee. That's a product. So product. And products are enabled by technology. And it's products which disrupt. It's not the technology. So some people understand how to leverage new technology in their product. And one thing which makes me think a lot about is that it's easier for a technology company to acquire domain knowledge than for a strong domain company to acquire technical excellence. Now, if you think, I don't want to talk too much about Apple here, but if you think about Apple, now they have Apple Pay, they have a credit card by now. What's holding them back from becoming a bank? Because these days, banks is mostly software. And guess what? They know how to build software. I think it's just probably monopoly laws or something like that, that they are not allowed to do that. Now, all those other companies are really well established in a specific domain. Well, they have to catch up their game to really get the technical excellence understood. And I think this is also kind of why we are worried about technical disruption, because most companies are not in control of their technology. They're being kind of somehow forced, pushed around by it. So that's kind of an important aspect there as well. But then this brings up the question, what actually is a product? And now Bogdan and I, we did just define a product simplified as a product. It has a producer and a consumer. So somebody who builds the product and somebody who purchases it. And the consumer is willing to pay for the product, or sometimes if it's an internal product which you don't really buy, you get a cost benefit by using the product, because maybe something becomes more efficient in the way you work internally, and it solves a problem for the consumer. So to quickly summarize principle 1, you should think in products, not in projects. And next month, Scrum is turning 25 years. And Scrum was shown to the public in 1995 at the UPSL conference in Austin, Texas. And Scrum was developed a couple of years beforehand. So it's really amazing that about 25 plus years, Ken and Jeff, they really realized that products are much more important than projects. And that's why we have a product owner in Scrum and not a project owner. Now let's look into principle 2. How to identify the right product. So I just draw here a classical hierarchy. We often see it in companies. And let's say this company claims, yeah, we are using Scrum. So they would have a product backlog for each one of those departments. And they would also then have a product owner. So we would have like 6 product owners here already. And let's say now they have to build a product or a larger initiative, which I draw here as the red one. And then it's being broken down. So, well, you do this first. And once you have created that, you pass it over to the other ones. And then you pass it over to the other ones. And you pass it over to the other ones. Well, they have nothing to do here. So you just pass it over to those guys over here. And what's the consequence of that? Well, we are stuck in a project mindset because we have to sequence all the activities down there. And basically, this leads to a sequential life cycle. And that's also when we put our milestones and gates and reports and everything in place there. And all of this leads to all this dependency management and coordination overhead we have. And all of this also causes handoff, information scatter, and high inventory, because you would have inventory in each one of those backlogs, essentially, where work items get being pushed over. And this also leads to too much focus on efficiencies and also working on low value features, because these guys have nothing important to do for a long time, but they need to justify their existence. So they would do non-important work and try to make it look important. But all of this leads also to opaque measure of progress, because you don't really know where you are. You just look at those reports and you hope everything is fine. And now if you look at these guys here, they have nothing to do at all. They probably start to invent work to even more justify their existence. And all of this setup here, this leads to a loss of customer and the whole product focus, because you think more in those activities and handovers and all of these things. And finally, all of this, if you look into queuing theory, is really interesting. If you look into this in this field here, the cost of delay, because this will take longer and longer and longer, and therefore also less value. And I just draw this right now here for one product. Now the next one is coming in, and the next situation, and the next one is coming in, and the situation gets even worse. And then we would have is like, why didn't you deliver? You promised me to deliver to me on October 7th. And they would say, you know what, Ralph, we would have delivered if those guys over there would have taken their promise to deliver something, but they didn't. And then I would talk to those guys and I say, yeah, Ralph, they let us down over there. It's not our fault. So the blaming game starts. And then the answer is often, yeah, we do Scrum. Doesn't work. Well, if you don't do it right, sure, it will not work. So what often happens is that some people look at this Gordian knot we have here in this setup, and they will come back after some while and just say, guys, we've figured out, we have the answer. So there is the plan. Everything is written in there. It tells exactly who has to do what and when to the handovers and all of this is happening. So no one of you must deviate the plan. Now, essentially what happens is, instead of kind of empowering people to the right work, we make a step back by being plan-driven, top-down command and control approach. And that's often a consequence I see as well. Now, the way I like to think about it, let's pick out here this yellow product. So essentially the pink line I just draw in here, that's the value stream. And at the end of this value stream, that is where your product, your customer is, your consumer. Because this all of those elements in this value stream, this is what forms your product. Now, what does this mean for us if we really want to approach it in the right way from a Scrum Agile perspective? So essentially, we have to identify what are all those activities, all of the things we need to do in here in order to make this product reality. And then we have to bundle it together. So in this case, we say, okay, all of those different teams, departments, or something, we would group together. And here, what we would have here is a scaled setup of Scrum. So we would have 7 development teams. So each one of the circles represents a development team, and a dot in there would be a developer. And the simple rule for Scrum is, for one product, you have one product owner and one product backlog. So now we have something beautiful. We have a self-contained product. This product includes everything it needs to essentially be built. And as long as we can say this product is done, think about your definition of done, all is good. We have a product which is releasable, which can potentially create value. Well, I'm afraid it's not that easy in reality, because then there's the other product and there's the next product. And usually we have some overlaps. Now, the important aspect here is to not think that this overlap means that there is one team working for two products. Essentially, it means that these two products, they share a underlying technology. It could be a database, a CMS system, or something like that. So let's say now there is this yellow product who wants to make a change to this shared component in here. So according to the Agile Manifesto, I would just expect them, that individuals in interaction, that they go over there and they talk to the people on the red product and just say, hey, we need some changes here. Let's talk about that. Let's figure out what we could be doing. And then the yellow team says, we're done. Everything is fine. And the red one says, yeah, same here. So the way I think about it is that I can play with your toy. I can improve your toy. I must not break it for you. And in case maybe the yellow team says it works for us and the red one says, no, something isn't working for us, well, we make a rollback. We look into that. We talk again until we fix it. And then we are back to the situation. The same thing applies here and here. But now in the center, this is what I like to call our crown jewel. So everything, it's really core to the company, to the enterprise. If something would happen to that, that would be really bad. So the idea is to somehow like build a fence around that and make sure that nothing bad is happening to that. So we somehow have to safeguard it. And the easiest answer and the most obvious answer is usually to put a component team in charge. Say, you're in charge of making sure this thing here is always in a working order and you maintain and extend it as needed. And maybe I would then go to this component team and tell them, hey guys, I would need a change. And they probably would tell me, yeah, Ralph, sure, no problem. 6 weeks. Maybe we would tell them, yeah, guys, kind of need it now, end of this week, please. And they would tell me, no, sorry, Ralph, 6 weeks. So essentially, we see again the problem of a component team, because a component team is always a bottleneck. Essentially, the way I think about that fence, and this is also when I think about digital and advancements in technology. So somehow I think through smart use of technology, we can somehow lower this fence. And by lowering this fence, it means that more and more work can be taken out from the component team to be done, but externalized to the other teams. So more and more people could actually participate on that. They would still safeguard it, maybe do a review or something like that, but overall, they would become less and less of a bottleneck. And again, this is where right technology comes into the picture, and this technology is existing these days. So it's not easy to get it working, but it's out there. Okay, so identify the right product. Now, this also means we have to find the right level of abstraction for our product. So maybe some of you drove a car this morning. Maybe you dropped off your kids at school before you went back home and dialed into this conference. So these days, steering wheels, they have buttons on them to initiate a phone call or to, I don't know, adjust the volume and something like that. So would a button like that be a product? And the short answer is yes, there's a producer and there's a consumer. And it solves a problem. Yeah. But I'm sure you never bought a button for your steering wheel. No. But there's this company building steering wheels. They purchase those buttons. So is a steering wheel a product? Yes, absolutely. The same criteria apply again. And usually I ask in my trainings, who of you bought a steering wheel? Once in a while, I get a hand up, some tinkerer guy, kind of maybe they have an old time or something like that. But usually, no, you don't even purchase a steering wheel. You purchase a car, because a car is the product which solves an important problem for you, transport, either of yourself, maybe of your loved ones, or maybe of some products you have to drive around. So it's about finding the right level of abstraction. And I think the higher you go, usually the better it is, but you shouldn't go too high. Now we have here like widget and component. Think about the buttons, think about the steering wheel, think about the car. Maybe even a bigger car if you need that. But you could even go further up and just say a plant which is there to build cars is also a product if you think about that. Tesla bought their plant in Fremont, California from Toyota many years ago. So it's finding the right level of abstraction. So that's if we have identified a product which is really of value for our user, consumer, we then can just put a Y line here and put in a diagonal. And then you could just say, well, now for this product, that's the amount of kind of people we need to work on that. Gives you an idea how big this circle would be, like going back to the slide we had before. Now for a large product, that would be then a scale setup. Maybe if it's more teams, then working on that as well. Now, if you look at what we do down here, yes, sure, you could leverage Scrum for that, but would it meaningful? Because if you just hammer out widgets with Scrum, yes, there again, your product is my component. It's kind of like, it's again finding the right level of abstraction, but is it meaningful what we're doing here? And the way I think about that is that further out we move on this diagonal, the higher our degree of validation actually is. Because if we build the right widgets or the right buttons, that's important, but it's not winning the game for us. Building great steering wheels, that's more important than having a button on there. But again, it's not winning the game for us, but building the right car, that's the right validation we need. And if you look at this 2x2 here, let's say the size of how many development teams we have here and how many products. So one product, one development team, that's Scrum. There's no rocket science there anymore. One product backlog, one team working in it, one product at the end of the sprint. Now, if we would have a bigger product like this guy we had here, you would have still one product backlog, several teams working out of it, only one product at the end again. Now, the top right, several products, several development teams, that's where I think is portfolio management living. And I would expect that a company has like a backlog for their portfolio, and they refine it in the same way, they break it down, they reorder it with all the things, their initiatives they think they're important for them as a company. And then once in a while, once a team has kind of done and released the current version or product, whatever they created, they would get something on there. Maybe it's kind of the smaller product or it's a larger product, and they would then work on that until it's done again and released before they take on the next one. Now here at the bottom right, several products, one development team. That's when I like to draw this guy here, because that's the area of pain. And now there's this thing in Scrum which we call the sprint goal. Now, if you're here, it probably would be really hard to come up with a decent sprint goal. Well, you could come up with a mechanical sprint goal. Well, for this product we do this, for this product we do that, and for this product we do that, and sure. But is it a good sprint goal? That's one of the situations we have here. And this is the beauty about Scrum, in my opinion, is because if something is awkward when you use it, it's usually a symptom of an underlying problem here. And one of the values in Scrum is focus. There is really no focus because we jump all over the place. So essentially we can say here, this is the Scrum. Here we have like this bigger Scrum setup, the scaled Scrum setup, and basically this orange area, that's kind of the area of pain. And there's the sentence which I remember from my trainer colleague, Cesario Ramos, and he just pointed it really nicely, say, scale your product, not your Scrum. Just throwing more Scrum teams at a problem doesn't fix it. You have to really identify the right product and the right level of abstraction for the product to make it successful. Cool. Now let's look into principle 3, product ownership. And that's what we have here. This is what I like to call the onion. So there's kind of layers upon layers. And every company, I dare to say, has a vision where they want to go. And based on that vision, they would come up with a business strategy. Now, down here, area of Scrum, we know how to plan a release, we know how to plan a sprint, and we know how to do our daily planning, kind of in a daily Scrum. But you can see now here in between, there's this gap. And in our book, we call it the product management vacuum. And maybe you can remember from a physics class that a vacuum has this strong inert need to fill itself. And if we're not careful, it fills itself with milestones, charters, reports, and plans. And those plans are usually driven by scope, time, and budget. What was the first principle? Think in products, not in projects. But this is a project mindset again. Because we think that, oh yeah, we have planned everything, we are still on track, everything is fine, we're doing fine. Are we? I think it's perceived safety, it's not a real safety. So we have to fill this vacuum in a more meaningful way. And the first thing is that if we think in products, every product should have a vision where we want to take it. So if it's a new product, it's probably the vision of the new product you come up with. But even if you just work on an existing product, you can have a vision about what will be the next release, the next version of this product make better. And once you have that vision, you can come up with a strategy for that product. So essentially, product ownership should span kind of this area here. And why is this going a little bit higher? Because you as a product owner, you should have the chance to ask those people up here, why is this important? Why? And through this conversation, through those answers, you as a product owner, you would really understand why the company thinks and acts in specific ways, why certain things are important. And once you have understood that, you can actually turn it into a vision for a product. And once you have that, you can think about, now I'm in charge for this product. That's my strategy. This is how I think we should pursue that. Think about it like a rough roadmap. And then you would give it into the team or teams to do the work. So basically, and you would even talk to them kind of like the sprint would be the handover. And in English, there's this word of amalgamation, which basically means you bring two elements together without having an interface in between. And think about product ownership like an amalgamation to combine the upper idea of a company, the vision and the strategy, and bring it into the people doing the work as needless as possible, to lose as little information as possible to turn out the best possible product. And at the end, it's all about vision, value, and validation. So you would come up with a vision for the enterprise, but also then visions for your product. Then you would focus on value for your users. What is it? What you think is more important? And then while you do it, you would also try to validate again and again. Are we on track? Are we doing the right thing? Vision, value, validation, the 3 V's. And instead of product owner, because I think ownership is more an attitude, and it's not necessarily only limited onto one person. There's one person, the product owner, accountable for all of this happening. But then often some people come to me and say, you know what, Ralph, I'm a product owner. I say, great. And then we talk, and then it turns out that they got a thick binder of requirements, and they sit down at Jira and they type them into Jira as stories. And in reality, yes, they are product owner, but I'm afraid they are what we like to call a scribe, someone who's really good at typing quick amounts quickly. Then the next one would be going to the customer, asking what they want, and running forward and backward, because the development team will ask questions. Do you mean this? Do you mean that? And going forward and backward. And that's once in a while you would say, you know, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. I'll figure it out for you. And you would run forward and backwards. And that's what we refer to as a proxy product owner. Now there's an important separation line in here. So now on the right-hand side of this line, we have someone we call a business representative. So if I would do a medical product, I would like my product owner to be a doctor or nurse. I was once helping at a bank to replace an existing loan platform. And our product owner was brilliant. He had over 30 years of experience in doing loans for companies, for private people, all kinds of things. And he told us clearly, always do this. In this case, never do that. Here, you have to be careful. There's certain things you need to consider. But once in a while, there was a situation where he said, instead of spending money on that, I'd rather spend it there and a little bit less here. But he couldn't shuffle the money around in order to maximize value. So the next step up is what we call like a sponsor. So you have also budgetary rights in that regard. And there's one step even further up, which technically, in my opinion, doesn't change a lot anymore, but from your mindset, quite a bit. And that's what we call the entrepreneur. So we expect a product owner to be like an entrepreneurial mindset. And sometimes people tell me, hey, Ralph, I'm working for a large corporation. I can't be an entrepreneur. You can't be an entrepreneur from like what the word really means, but you could still have the mindset. You could go out there, talk to your customers, find out, build a relationship, and over again, show them what you have to collect feedback and build on that. Now, actually, if you think about that, on the left-hand side of the red dashed line, you don't even justify your name as product owner because you don't own, you're being told what to do. Now, on the right-hand side of this dashed line, that's when you really can initiate and drive the product guided by this entrepreneurial mindset, if possible. So I just hinted at that, and that's kind of the principle for I'm living by. And for me, product development is a strategic and tactical team sport. And let's say you have your product vision, you come up with your product strategy, and then you think about what is the best possible value we could create with that, so the value discovery, and then you deliver it, and then you also validate that what you've created is the right thing. And far too often, and especially in specific scaling frameworks, product ownership only lives on the bottom tier, bottom layer we have here. But this is really, really low because at this point, you wouldn't really understand the upper lines. So this would be mostly tactical down here, but you wouldn't have the strategy. So what you really need to do is you have to combine that. You have to really kind of cut through all those layers. So, and this is again where I think product ownership or product development is also a team sport, because probably as a product owner, you are more kind of living up here, and down here, this is where your development team would do most of the work with your programmers, business analysts, and maybe UX people you have in your development team. But they would always kind of be in contact and talking to each other, making sure kind of we do the right thing. And the other problem is that now if you're a product owner down here, you wouldn't understand. Sometimes we see some people see product management up here and then product ownership down here, but those people here, they would not understand the strategy, and those people up here, they wouldn't understand the technology. So that's why you should consider a product owner to be more or less like a product manager, working and thinking agile, instead of just writing stuff down and throwing it over a wall, kind of really interacting, like bringing it together with the development team. It's in my product owner trainings, the trainings I have the most fun, it's really sometimes a blast, is when I really work with good product managers, because they just know how to do all of these things naturally, and then we bring in other elements, and it's usually really satisfying for all of us. So we want to get away from this left-hand side and bring everything together, what we have here on the right-hand side, like make a thin slice from your vision into doing the work and validating that we have done the right thing. So principle 5, that's kind of more or less like a summary. So for us, the product owner is an entrepreneur, maybe call him a product manager who thinks and acts agile. A product owner engages and delegates responsibility to the team. But, let's take out this but, and a product owner always stays accountable for the product. I mean, that's kind of what the name insinuates anyway. This is what real product ownership in the meaning of Scrum and Agile mean. And in this way, if we do that, if you think about it, that's really how we can fill the vacuum. And pretty much all the things we do is all about filling this vacuum and somehow making it meaningful, that we have successful products at the end. And again, if you have really understand what product ownership is about, I think you should have gotten some ideas here. Vision, value, validation. So we talked about company visions, but also visions for products. So having visions is important, and sometimes we have those. Maybe you can just quickly look at those visions here. Just show those in my trainings as well, and then I'll often ask people, so which one do you think is better? And sometimes say, well, I think 2 is better than 1, and people say, no, I think 1 is better than 2. I think both of them are actually really crap, because they are long, abstract sentences. You read them. Once you read them and people ask you what it's about, they probably say, I think it was something like that. Our brain is not built for abstract stuff. It's not sticky. So really try to make more like really good visions. Really try to be specific. Emotional works as well, but make something where, for me, often the test is, what's the vision of your product? We don't have one. That's often the common answer. Or sometimes it's like, yeah, it's somewhere in Confluence. I can't really remember it. So how can people act on a vision like that if they don't really have understood it? A good exercise you can do for that field is like the summer meadow exercise. So I give half of the room, the left-hand side, this one here, and you tell them, 10 flowers, blue flowers with 5 petals each, and then 5 blue flowers with 6 petals each, and cows and stuff like that. And you also tell them, hey guys, your success will be measured by how closely you match the specification. Clearly incentivized. And the other half of the room, so they don't know that the other ones get something different, I give them that. So draw a beautiful summer meadow with blue and red flowers and green grass, some cows and birds under the shining sun. The scene reminds our customer of their childhood growing up on a farm. And then you also tell them your success will be measured by how happy your customer is with it. Now, the interesting thing is that in the setup, usually someone from this group here approaches me and asks me, is this you? And I say, sure, yes, that's me. And then they will ask me questions. They would engage with me. So do you want to have hills, mountains in the background, something like that? And I explain to them, and then they go to work, and sometimes they come back and ask me, does this look good to you? And so I say, yeah, I'd like to have a chimney on the house and then some smoke as well. And I'll do that. So kind of really, really great. Now, and usually then the outcome looks something like this here. On the left-hand side, yes, you can really see how they draw those flowers one after the other, following the specification by the dot. And actually, the funny thing here is that you can't zoom in anyway, but they checked off every line item on the specifications document essentially and say, done, well done, team. We made everything. Now, on the right-hand side, you can really see those pictures where they come together, and it's like pictures that draw up in less than 10 minutes, guided by division. So essentially, this is what we usually get from a requirements department or something like that. And this is a clear vision we have here on the right-hand side, and also kind of how we get measured also drives a lot about how we will work about that. So take that with you. Maybe do this exercise, run an example, an experiment with that at your company, and see kind of maybe this helps people to become more open for the importance of having a good vision. So create and share the product vision over and over again. So I like to start my sprint review with the product vision. Now everybody's in the room and just say, guys, you remember the vision of the product we are building? And if people say, oh no, not again, please, you just say it often enough. Because if people come with that, they know the vision and they don't want to hear it again. But if they know the vision, they can act on it and they have understood it. And this is also kind of the next bullet point here. So vision. Now let's look into value. And I think most of you have seen this already. Now, if we work in a classical waterfall approach where we plan everything and then we analyze everything and then we design everything and then we throw it over to implementation and we throw everything over to testing and then finally to releasing, then there's our product at the end. But there's this question mark on there because that's the first time we probably really can learn, have we done the right thing? Did we create value for our users or for the users we think are our users? And essentially all of this here in between, again, is the vacuum. So how can we change that? And the interesting thing is about this approach here is that then we put in those milestones here or gates, however you call that. And the interesting thing is, for example, design. Design is never late. If you have 3 months to draw boxes and circles and lines, you spend 3 months to draw those elements. And once the time is up, just there's our design document. Everything is done. But did we design the right thing? And everything we pass over is always everything because here we are driven by activity. So the batch size is the whole product. So here we actually plan the most. We plan everything, even though we know the least. That's kind of a little bit of a bomb in that regard. And therefore our value curve, excuse me, looks something like that. If we're lucky, we go all the way up. If not, we get stuck down here. And the other thing is that all the work we do in here, that's not for free. So we have an outlay which increases and increases and increases. And now if we release that product and we were successful, well, people will buy it, we start to make money. And once we go above this line here, we're in the area of positive cash flow. Now, from a Scrum perspective, when we are not driven by activity, but a clear focus on the value, we would ask our customer, hey, what's the most important thing for you? Well, this. Okay, how about we do that? And we come back to you in a couple of weeks and we show it to you and see if this is how you wanted it and take it from there. And we would do that. And they would say, okay, what's the next important thing? That. What's the next important thing? That. And then we get this value curve, which looks something like this. Often I then have people telling me, yeah, but the start and the ending point are the same. And I say, yes, you're right, they are the same. But if you look at this diagonal here, the red line is always above. It tries to catch up, whereas the green line is above all the time. And there's an interesting point. It's probably somewhere here. This is when the distance from the diagonal to the green line is the most. That means mathematically seen that on the right-hand side now of this line here, our slope is less than 1. And that means a sprint is probably costing more than the anticipated return on investment. Maybe we should ask ourselves, why are we still doing it? We spent more money than we probably will get back. Maybe it's some laws and regulations we have to fulfill. And I totally agree with that then, but that's a conscious decision at that point. But maybe if, thinking about being done, if we are done at this point in time, why just don't make a release? And well, again, all of this is not for free. We pay money for that. But if we are successful for that, we will kind of start to sell that, hit a positive cash flow earlier. And while this product is making us money, we can work on the next one or the next release of that. And then again, and then again. So from a risk mitigation point of view and from a value perspective, making money with it, absolute favorable. And, if we did something wrong here, ouch, this was really expensive. And if you do that and repeat that too many times as a company, that's kind of usually when you really go into a dire situation. Now, on the other side here, maybe once in a while, because I believe we have to take good educated risks, and once in a while we will fail, but it's only a smaller amount of money. So it's it will not be that devastating. Now, if you look at the visibility, now if we work in a defined waterfall approach, well, we plan everything and we know everything, and then it's a submarine submerging, and then at some point it comes up again, and then we hope we are in the right area. And again, all of this here, everything which is underwater here, is the vacuum again. Your ability to change decreases over time. Now, if you find out in testing here at the end, oh, we thought about something here wrong, that's going to be really, really expensive, or maybe you can't change it anymore. That's when we declare those elements as features. Value, we talked about this, and risk. Essentially, all our risks disappear once the value comes. Once this line is going up, our risks are going to go away. Now, if we do it again with a value-driven mindset, and when we start to work in sprints, now the shape of the curve doesn't really change, but the frequency goes up. So every couple of weeks, we would show our customer, hey, tada, there's the next version of the product. Do you like that? Let's talk about that. Let's figure out what we can do next. If there's anything we want to change, next one, next one, next one, and so on. Ability to change. And the line which you will see right now has nothing to do with Scrum itself. That's having about good engineering practices, good engineering capabilities built up within your organization. But then you would get to this flat line here, which basically means you can pretty much change anything, anytime. And that's also kind of an important aspect. Value, we talked about it already, and risk. Also this approach about, thinking about value, and I think mitigating risk is also of value. So what are the risks we are exposed to? If this problem materializes, we would be toast. What are these things we should be thinking about? Try to tackle them as early on as possible. I've been working on a product where the most important feature we did last after 2 years of development. And guess what happened? We couldn't implement it, and we spent months and months, and after 6 months, we concluded it doesn't work. Now, it was kind of a situation we spent close to 2 years to building up a new Java development in IDE with round-trip engineering, all of these things, and suddenly the most important features, which we always pushed, let's do this later on, and then suddenly it didn't work. And then we kind of had to really scale back on all the important features of the product, and it was an average IDE after that. So no success. So, but if you tackle those risks early on, and say, hey, I give you whatever, it was in England then, I give you whatever, 20,000 pounds, find out if you can do that. And I would come back in 2 weeks and I could tell you, no. Well, are you sure? I say, maybe there's another option. Well, I give you another more money. Let's try it again. And I would come back and say, no, it still doesn't work. And I'm convinced it will not work with the technology we have at hand right now. Well, we lost some money, but it's only some money, not everything. Okay. And most important, do you remember those 10 points we talked about if you, in the beginning? Now, if you work like that, like moving along the green line, there is no project mindset anymore, because every end of the sprint, we will have a working product. So the sequential life cycle and milestones, they are all disappearing because we can always show you a working product. All the dependency management and coordination, well, maybe there's something if you have a big product and the teams have to talk to each other, but hey, it's always focused on what is our current sprint goal. All the handoff, information scatter, and inventory would disappear. The efficiencies, well, you know what? I'm less concerned about efficiencies. I'm more concerned, a lot concerned about effectiveness. And that's what we have here with this focus on the product. And we wouldn't work on low value features either, because we would always try to maximize the value every sprint for our users. So the measure of progress, well, I think the best measure of progress is to see working product, which we will have there as well. We wouldn't invent work because everybody's pulling on the same string every sprint. Absolutely, point 8, use of customer focus. I mean, here we have a really, really clear customer focus. Cost of delay would go down, and we would have much more value, hopefully, if done right. So those problems, they disappear. So engage and collaborate with your stakeholders, especially your users, again and again, and build up the capabilities to release frequently. And once you have that established, you're not driven by technology anymore. You leverage technology for your hopefully competitive advantage, and be willing to learn and fail fast. I think the companies who are successful these days, these are the ones who can run the most experiments and make mistakes in a way that the customers don't really see it, feel it, but based on that, they can then really leverage and then be successful. Now let's look into validation. And there was yesterday the talk of Patricia, and she talked about EBM, I would assume, and she probably also showed you this graphic here. So I don't want to go too much into detail here, but I think kind of this idea about having key value areas which are important, like what is unrealized value, what is something we can anticipate that there's a gap somewhere out in the market, if we could fill that with a product, and then do some calculations on the back of a napkin if we think it makes sense, and then maybe come up with some experiments to run that. Also current value, how are we currently perceived in the market? Are our customers happy about us? How are things going there? And then also ability to innovate. How innovative can we be, and how long does it take for our ideas to actually be on the market? And now if you go above this dashed line here, is that this here has more a market value focus, like kind of this is our current reality. And these are more internally, like what are your internal capabilities? And this again has a lot to do with your technical excellence you have built up within your organization. And the way I like to think about it is the following. And let's say, for example, your customer satisfaction is going down because the quality of the product has somehow decreased over time. And maybe looking at it, we find out is that the number of bugs has really went up. More and more customers are calling us about problems and so on, and more bugs get opened. So this reduces our ability to innovate, because now we have to spend more money on maintenance and support. Now, how can we fix that? So how can we increase our customer happiness? So probably an idea could be, let's increase the quality of our product again. Now let's think about what could we do. Maybe we could say we have to have more tests, but having more tests means they should run automatically. So we could invest in test automation. Maybe we can also start to look into what's the coverage, how many tests are automatically. In the end of we would really like have a product which tests itself. So we can also measure like maybe test coverage. And I know test coverage is a little bit controversial, but I think in that regard, it wouldn't be wrong to measure that. So you could come up with many ideas about what to do beforehand in order to improve more as strategic goals. So think about this is more strategic again, and this is more tactical. And we talked about this, that it's kind of a product ownership is a product development is a tactical and strategic team game. And this is when I like to bring in these ideas of 4DX, the 4 disciplines of execution. And they have this understanding about there's a difference between strategic and tactical, and leading and lagging. So down here, the tactical things are more leading. So I can start to invest in test automation. I can start to invest in measuring some code quality metrics in my product and so on, and maybe train the developers in doing more test-driven development and things like that. And all of those leading initiatives, they will hopefully then lead to the lagging results, because those lagging results, they are strategic. And the problem with strategic results is that we can't have them at our fingertips every day. Maybe we can only get those numbers once a year, maybe once a quarter, maybe even once a month. But if it's once a month, it's like 29, 30 days we hope for the best. On the other hand, leading measures we can look at every day. is this improving? Is this improving? Is this improving? And if our assumption about this was right, we would then see the lagging proof in the market that something has changed for the better. So essentially for me, the takeaway is I'm a big fan of EBM, evidence-based management. I think everything we do, we should have somehow an idea about how can we measure it, how can we collect the evidence. But I'm also a big fan of 40X, like leading and lagging. Think about that. There's so many things which are really hard to measure from a strategic point of view. What could you measure beforehand, again and again, to see whether you're in the right track? And sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes you measure the wrong things, but then again, you would learn it from that because the evidence wouldn't be there, and then you can think about something else to do. Vision, value, validation. So that's me. I'm originally from Germany, currently living in Switzerland. I've turned Agile about 20 years ago, worked in different industries, different domains, distributed all of these things. So, and I'm a trainer with Scrum Dog for over 10 years by now. It was March 2010. I became a trainer a long time ago. Okay. With that, I would have concluded my talk, and maybe a little bit about myself here. So this is kind of a book I had mentioned before a couple of times, The Professional Product Owner, which also has been translated into limited Chinese, I think is the word, and their German translation will come out by the end of the year. It's a little bit delayed. And actually, since a couple of weeks, there's a Polish translation out there as well. Interesting. So I looked through that, and there's nothing you can really understand. So it's kind of a but I was told that Polish is probably a really hard language to learn anyway. So that's my excuse. I'm really bad at languages, as long as it wasn't a programming language. And there's the other book, like the 97 Things Every Scrum Practitioner Should Know. So Don and I, we were both the authors of this book. We also have put in 3 papers there as well. So thank you so much for your patience and time to be here with me. And if there's any questions, I guess now would be the time.
Yes, definitely. We have so many questions, Ralph. That was excellent. That was awesome. Big bravo. Big bravo.
Thank you.
People want to see your presentation. People want to share this presentation via YouTube in their organization. And we have just a few minutes and many questions. So the question for you at the beginning is it possible? I didn't ask you before, so any answer is good.
Go ahead.
Is it possible that you will join us on Gather platform and you can continue conversation with people just after your talk? Is it possible for you?
That's possible, yes, no problem.
Yeah,
sure.
Wonderful. So I won't manage to ask every question right now, and Ralph will be available on Gather platform, so we can arrange conversation furthermore via this platform. And of course, you will have a Slack channel dedicated to this talk, and there is another possibility to ask questions to Ralph. But the first question from Dominika was, what about the quality of the product? If everyone changes everything, isn't it a problem in complex system?
So the way I think about it in Scrum is that everything can change, and if everything can change all the time, things don't really work out that well. And for me, the sprint is like a container of stability, because once a sprint starts, there's a sprint goal, and the development team created a plan for how they think they can reach that sprint goal, and then we kind of protect them. And I would assume that it's probably done by the Scrum Master if things get tough. Now they have the length of the sprint to really focus on reaching that sprint goal, and be driven by the daily scrums and all the other interactions along the way. And then at the end of the sprint, we could look at this product. So essentially, our saying is that once a sprint has started, there is no change of the plan anymore. Now, if something happens which is important enough to justify a change, then Scrum tells you, you cancel the sprint, you throw everything overboard you have created so far. We go back to the drawing board, we think about the new, more important things, and we plan for them, and we would immediately start a new sprint. However, that has cost implications. Yeah. That's not for free, and it's also dramatic for the development team. And the only role in Scrum who can do that is the product owner. And usually as a product owner, you start to judge it. Is it worthwhile changing something, or can I wait? And I had 2 sprint cancellations in my career doing Scrum about 20 years. And it was good reasons, but overall, I think this thing about the sprint, like this protective shield for the development team to get heads down and work towards the sprint goal.
Yeah, there are not such thing as a free lunch. You are absolutely right. And the question connected a little from Agata is, how do we check if the product is big enough, but not too big?
Okay. I mean, this is a question I wish I would have a quick answer for that. And usually if I work with companies, I always tell them to identify the product. This is something I can help you with. I can help you maybe ask some questions. But in the end of the day, you have to find that out for yourself, in which way, how you slice and dice it. But for me, it's like the important aspect. For example, let's say you want to buy a house and you want a loan, then the loan would be the product and the bank would be kind of like the provider, the producer of the product. So and it solves a problem. I want to buy a house. I want to have finally own something and I can live in there until I'm retire or something like that. So, but far too often I see that things going towards that loan are also considered products, and they are. And as I said, your component, my product is your component essentially. So, and the way I think about it, and usually it kind of points in the right direction, is follow the money. Who in the end is giving you money for the use of the product? And that's your user. And then you have to work backwards from that user. What are all the things I have to put together in order to make that product for this very specific user to make them happy?
Yeah, and another question connected and tricky one, I would try. It's from Philip, and it's about internal products when there is something that there's no value itself, like platform, like something like that, and it is a connected chain of things. So does it make any sense to have a product owner for such a valuable product? What do you think about it?
I mean, if you have an internal platform, everybody is relying on that, becomes more like a core component. And if you remember the 3 overlapping circles, so that you can consider this to be one. And I think if this is really important, it probably makes sense to make sure nothing bad happens to that, because it could be really devastating for your business. On the other hand, think in vertical slices. I mean, each one of your products maybe needs some services of that component, this platform essentially. And how could you make this more accessible for those products to use the platform in a way that they can leverage it for their own benefit and make changes to it? And this is maybe where you think about community of practice or something like that. But again, this is a really challenging question, and I don't think there is the perfect answer out there. There are good answers out there, because anyway, how you slice and dice your products and how you think about this, there will be a side which is better helped and a side which will be less better helped. And if you do it the other way, it would be just the opposite essentially. So I think you have to try to minimize the negative side effect as much as possible.
Yeah, it always depends on the context. So it's good to deep dive into those questions, especially when many people gave +1 for this specific question. So if it is possible, I would invite you to the lunch number 2 at the bottom of the map. And if you want to continue the conversation with Ralph, it will be possible right after this talk. And thank you very much. I am so happy, Ralph, and the presentation was awesome. I'm overwhelmed, and I will look at it, with silent mind later on.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.